Hello and welcome to On the Flywheel episode 5. I am your host, Jonathan Mart of Flywheel Consulting, and today we have with us Ramsay Brown, who is a commercial relationship manager at a local community bank. Thanks for being on the podcast today, Ramsay.
Absolutely, yeah, happy to join you.
So let's just jump right into things. Can you start out by talking about your career path, maybe a little bit about your education, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, so, my title is not the most clear in terms of what I do. So as commercial relationship manager, I'm essentially a lender at a local community bank. So I manage borrowing relationships for the bank. And the path that I took to get there really kind of dates back to my MBA program. I was finished an undergrad in business, general business management degree, back in 2008, which was, a wonderful time to be coming out with a general business degree. So I went back to school and did my MBA. And during that MBA program, I took a financial analysis course. That was more on public companies, but nonetheless, it made a lot of sense to me. And I looked around the room and it made more sense to me than other smart people in the room. And so I thought, well, what can I do where I just get to go look at business financials all day? And so that led me to banking, and I've basically been there ever since. So coming up on 15 years I've been in banking.
Wow, you're getting old.
Yeah, getting up there. And I've been, in a lot of different roles in lending through my career and learned a lot. It's been really good.
That's awesome. I think that was a lot of my motivation coming out of school too. In terms of like getting to see a lot of different businesses and just like enjoying the process of learning about other people's businesses and how they run. That's why I went to work for Ernst & Young doing, kind of consulting and auditing stuff, is just because you get to work on cool projects at cool companies that you wouldn't otherwise have access to and get exposure to stuff. So that's neat. And I guess that's probably the same, right? Because you're getting to talk to people about the intimate details of their business when they're helping them figure out financing and stuff. And
That's still, that's one of the main reasons I'm still here, is I really enjoy that. I enjoy talking to clients and people about, a building they want to buy, or a business that they're trying to expand, or equipment that they need to, take their production to the next level, whatever it might be. I mean, you get to just be part of some really fun projects for clients.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so it's the relationship part of it and getting to see people's business that kind of keeps you in it. Yeah,
and that's my our community, my community bank background is really about being a single point of contact for anything they need in lending. And so, having those multi-year, sometimes multi-decade now relationships with people, seeing their business grow and, change and evolve with their industry, and maybe they find a new niche that becomes the whole business at some point in the future. It can be pretty amazing. Yeah,
you got to go on the journey with them. That's kind of neat. So have you always worked for community banks then?
Yeah, essentially. I spent a little bit of time with a big bank just as a teller way back when. But, but yeah, community banks pretty much my entire career.
And why community banks over some of the bigger financial institutions?
Well, I mean, community banks, for me personally, the bank I work for really supports the local community, and that's important to me as a person. So that's always kind of been, a big part of where, why I chose where I work. But then also on top of that, the larger banks, they're outsourcing all the underwriting, all the other stuff to large farm kind of outfits in the Midwest and other places. So, the decision making isn't local anymore, and so a lot of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't nearly that bad, when I first started.
As you were coming up.
But I mean, the more those banks have consolidated and their processes change, the farther and farther away the decision making really gets. And
that's tough. I would have a hard time. Like, I personally, as someone who's like, helped run a family business and has now started my own business, I would not want to be having financial relationships with these big companies that like don't know me from a hole in the wall. Like, I can't, if I'm having an issue, I can't go like chase Ramsay down and say, hey, like, what's going on here? What's the problem? So
that's a big part of it. I mean, once and those big banks, you really got to be a big company to really get that kind of attention.
Right.
And so for medium-sized businesses, local family-owned businesses, you just don't get the treatment. It's just a 1-800 number kind of a thing, and so the touch really isn't there. So.
Well, I think that segues really well into just talking about kind of your overall professional life, and you may have already answered this, but I like to ask everyone, what's the best part and the worst part about what you do?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely talked about the best part. I mean, it's really just working directly with clients, getting to know them, getting to know their business, and being part of their their path, really, as a hopefully successful business. I mean, that's really rewarding. I think the hardest part of my job is banking's a pretty heavily regulated industry, so we are constantly being audited, like absolutely, like basically every other month, pretty much.
Yeah,
you're being audited by somebody, either internal auditors, the FDIC, the state auditors, and so that is just it's a lot of work. It's good, like we need to do it. It's part of keeping banks safe, but it's definitely a distraction that takes away from.
That's always the tough part, is like, because we experienced that in my family business with in agriculture, is that audits are important. It helps make sure that everyone's following the rules and a similar set of standards and stuff, but it's such a distraction from the work that needs to get done. Right? I could say that like 90% of the stuff that we have to, like, the ducks we have to have in a row are things that we like and that we're forced to document and have processes and stuff. All things we had to do regardless, we were already doing, like, just things you need to do to run your business well. But you're just like forced to do like all this extra busy work just to be able to prove to an auditor you're actually doing it.
Yeah, that really is it. The documentation side and gathering all the information that they're going to want to look at, so that it's there when they show up and they can go through it, and making sure it's all clear so that they don't come up with random questions just because they were missing something.
Right.
So, but again, banking had issues. Part of the reason 2008 happened and why I had to, I decided to go back and do an MBA was, there was kind of wild stuff that was being done in a section, and that, that was really a particular section of banking, right? I mean, it was all mortgages, and it was,
right.
I mean, we don't have to go back down that rabbit hole, but
so was your MBA just kind of like, hey, I need a little bit more time for things to like correct, and it doesn't hurt to add a few letters after my name?
Yeah. I mean, that was the main thing. I didn't have a plan when I finished my degree, and obviously with the overall kind of job market being in a not great space, I had the ability to go back and do an MBA pretty quickly. I actually did it in 18 months because I just wanted to get through the
power through it,
and I had the ability, and any MBA person I'd ever talked about, like, they would go back to school and like do it at night, or when they were full-time working and had a family, and I was like, well, if I can sneak it in now, it might help me down the line, and it definitely has.
No, that's good. My thing about, I've never gotten an MBA, but I graduated in 2011, and so I came into like things were like starting to like had started picking back up, and like there was plenty of jobs, like it wasn't so much of an issue, but that was like the discussions were like just a few years ago, no one could find a job coming out of school. I think to me MBAs are like, I definitely see the strongest value from them is after you've been working for a moment, and then because when I was considering it, I was researching it and saying, oh, like, should I do it or should I not? A lot of people were doing it because almost for the network, right? It's like a way to kind of like increase your network, kind of level up substantially. It's not always as much about what you learn in it, especially if you've already had a business degree, right? But if you're like if you were an engineer and now you're getting an MBA, that's kind of a different conversation. But
something that I'm going to actually be starting in the fall is basically an MBA in banking called Pacific Coast Bankers School.
Okay.
And again, similarly, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but the network you get, because it's all bankers and it's all high level. You're really learning how to run a bank. Soup to nuts in that program, but it's all bankers all learning together, and the network is super worthwhile, lifelong. So
Yeah, that's exactly it. For anyone considering an MBA, okay?
Yeah.
Not that I have one yet. At this point, I probably won't do it just because lifetiming, kids, and everything. It's
and MBAs, depending on where you see yourself being, if it's in the corporate ladder or wherever else, the skills can be useful, but there's college in general, depending on where you actually want to take it, it might not have the ROI that you would think.
Well, that was kind of my ultimate conclusion, was like, unless I was going to lean heavily into like corporate life or trying to get like a job at a much bigger company, then I wasn't so worth it, because it's expensive too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you're going, it's not as bad if you're going to a place like Sonoma State, but
but the time commitment and
it was just going to be a lot
with family life. And
Yeah.
It gets more difficult.
So let's get back on track here. You've been doing what you do for a long time. You've clearly been successful at it. So what do you think makes you different versus the other guy? Do you think there's any kind of key to your long-term success?
I think initially, the way my head works around business balance sheets and income statements, and my ability to kind of just see what's happening, and it's kind of hard to explain, I guess, but it's not a skill that a lot of people necessarily innately have. It can certainly be learned, and I've learned a lot more beyond that, but that was the big thing that really got me going in it, and it's still very useful today. But as you've progressed in your career, I spend less time really down in the numbers, and so just being proactive and really thinking all the way through either the problem or the project and getting to the finish line, and being able to find this might be a hurdle, that might not work, this could cause us problems down the line, and kind of having all those factors identified is really what helps me get through whatever it is, the loan request, smoothly. And I think that is something that really has helped me from both a customer service standpoint. I mean, clients want the project to move, the loan to get done, without a lot of headache. I mean, they're
create
busy
a
people.
bunch of back and forth and stuff.
They're busy people, and so the easier I can make it on them by, okay, let's have a good conversation up front. I'll figure out all the bits and pieces that we're going to need, get it all done in one lump sum, and then they can basically, be hands off and be like, all right, when are we going to be signing loan documents? I know that that's something that busy business owners really value.
So if we were to summarize that, is it like your ability to kind of grok a difficult problem and see the roadblocks and then deal with them from that point?
Yeah, I think that the experience of being in this business for a long time, I know what is possible, what's not possible, what is challenging to do, what is less challenging to get accomplished. And so just having those kind of guiding decision-making things up front so that you don't get down the line and hit a dead end and be like, okay, we got to back up and go this way now.
Right.
That's really important to getting things through to the finish line.
So then this might be related to that. What do you think then that a lot of people that are just starting out or perhaps less successful at what you do get wrong?
Experience helps because you see where problems happen when you come up.
You're not
going
to get caught off guard by them as much.
Yeah, but being that proactive, kind of, okay, let's talk to an experienced person. Hey, banks have, there's multiple lenders in my bank. I'm not the best with certain things, and they have a lot of experience in that particular segment, like, say, construction loans, right? I've done plenty of construction loans, but they're not what I do every day. And we have construction lenders in the bank that's pretty much all they do. And so their wealth of knowledge in that particular segment, trying to leverage that. If I have a project that I'm looking at and it's got some weird facets, I'll absolutely tap on them and be like, hey, I'm seeing this. And so I think when you start out, talk as much as you can, talk through things with somebody senior. I mean, most of my career, I've been extremely lucky in terms of being surrounded by very smart, experienced people.
Good mentors along the way.
Yeah, and making a conscious decision to like really try and extract as much knowledge as I can and from those people has really been instrumental in getting me to where I am now.
So maybe it's then like, don't be afraid to ask questions.
No,
right?
I mean that's how you learn. You have to ask questions. And so yeah, I mean, you don't, if you're green in any industry, you don't want to pretend like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
When you don't.
Fake it till you make it isn't always the right advice.
No,
Especially when it comes to money.
yeah, no, definitely not. And even in pretty much any like kind of professional services kind of business, if you really don't know what you're doing, like you can get down the line and have it really blow up on you. And that's what you don't want.
Right.
It's okay if you say, hey, I need to take a step back and like ask some questions and figure this out. They'll 5-minute or 1 day pause for you to go do some fact finding will always be better than getting 15, 20, 4 or 5 weeks into a process and have it totally go off the rails.
Yeah.
Because then usually that relationship is damaged.
Yeah, yeah, because you're like, oh, you were coming across as so professional and like you knew what was going on, and then most of the time, people are going to end up being blindsided by, or your customer is going to be blindsided by whatever the change is in the situation.
Yeah, or if you can't get accomplished what you thought you could.
Yeah.
I mean, then
you're in overselling, under delivering territory. Yeah. I think what's interesting there, what came to mind is not just the like asking good questions and not being afraid to ask questions, because I do think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in all walks of life, in all levels of experience, but also like something that I early in my career that I had to figure out was like knowing what you don't know and using that as a platform to ask questions.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, even now, like I've been doing this a long time, there's definitely stuff I don't know.
Yeah. And
that's okay. Like, and having the humility as a person, as a professional, be like, look, I don't have all the answers. And
right.
And, there's stuff that I have not done or seen. And if you come across something that's unique and, take the time, be open with your client about like, hey, look, I haven't done one of those in a long time, or I've only done one of those and it was a little bit rough. I'm going to leverage a coworker of mine to make sure we do this right.
Right. And I think that comes across too, like, I think it actually, even if you say you don't know something, assuming you're not coming across as like just a complete idiot or like completely not knowing what you're talking about, I think that does inspire confidence in people that are like, you know what, I'm not exactly sure about that, but let me go ask someone that does know. I have the resources to get you an answer, no problem.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier to soften it a little bit and be like, I've done something similar to that.
Right.
But,
right.
I haven't done that many of them, so let me go ask, because then if nothing else, you're virtue signaling or whatever, that you've experienced something tangentially nearby.
Yeah.
And so, they know that you're not totally out of your depth.
Yeah,
but
that's a great
you're going to
point.
ask the important questions that you need to ask to make sure it goes well.
Yeah, you're saying, hey, like, I haven't done exactly this, but I have the experience and the network to be able to figure this out, no problem for you. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's something I'm trying to be mindful of as I build my business is being straightforward with people about the things that I definitely can help with, being clear on the things like, that's not really my area, and then kind of the in-between is like, I don't have experience with that, but exactly that. But I've done things that are related to that a bunch. I can absolutely figure this out for you, no problem, and trying to ride that line, because that's what I'm trying to be really mindful of, not just like the overpromise and underdeliver thing, and managing expectations, and not saying, hey, I can do everything for you. I'm going to change your life.
And that's, you can never be everything to everyone.
Exactly.
That's just it's not a thing. And so knowing where you're good, where you execute well, maybe go out of that box a little bit here and there, but do your best to really stay in doing what you do best.
Don't be so desperate to make a sale that you shoot yourself in the foot or damage a long-term relationship.
And lending's interesting because, there is a sale per se, but it's, you've got to get the money back. So,
Right.
Banking's kind of a weird little unique, hence, they've got their own MBA program, essentially Pacifico's Banker School. Banking is a very unique industry because, there's the credit risk side, there's all the auditing, the regulator stuff. And so, it's a fun industry to be a part of, but it's very different than, sales, right? I mean, if you can make the sale and you made the sale, right? And then you move on.
Right,
Whereas, both good and bad. I have multi-year, multi-decade relationships with people to just continue to service them and take care of them and make sure that they're happy with their banking.
Yeah. So how are bankers conferences then? Are they know how to have a good time?
I mean, like a lot of industries, there used to be a lot more shenanigans than there are anymore. But it's always fun to swap stories with people at other institutions and. Things that have gone well, things that haven't gone well. There's always plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it's crazy when I talk to old timers in like different industries and stuff. And even like I remember when I was at Ernst Young and they talk about the things like for like corporate parties and stuff that they used to do back in like 70s, 80s, and like early 90s. I'm like, what? How is this real? It's hard to relate to, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and it, obviously there was problems that came out of that.
Well, that's fair.
And so it's a double-edged sword because it's too bad that some of the really fun stuff doesn't necessarily get to take place anymore. But
baby with the bathwater, but ultimately probably better.
Well, and you just never want to put people in a bad position. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about like maybe some of the more tangentially like related things that you do to be successful. Like how are you managing your time, your tasks, things you need to get done? Tools you're using, techniques, or what's kind of the
it's
thing?
really calendar driven and being conscious. Business always pops up randomly and things have to get done randomly. So, you can never totally schedule everything out.
Sure.
Like you just can't. But, making sure that you're staying on top of things as they move along.
Are you using any kind of a task manager, or are you just kind of dumping everything into your calendar?
Mostly for me, just putting things in the calendar, and then the bank has a process system, kind of like a loan origination system. So we have a lot of assistance
for
just
your like
in our
actual work product.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot of help in that regard, so tracking and tasks that need to get done and who does them and things like that. Because I work with several people on every loan, so there's always a lot of back and forth. And
what about
communication.
managing your relationships? Is there like a CRM at the bank, or is that just kind of an internal thing you're handling?
I mean, it's every account has somebody attached to it, so you can always look up the people and their things that are associated with them and things like that. CRMs are expensive and hard to set up and do well, frankly speaking. On in an industry of any size, they're all, I feel like every CRM I've ever come across is massively underutilized by most of its users.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And,
well, probably especially the ones. They're local banks, but they're probably also using some of like the biggest names in the CRM space, and they're like kind of behemoths.
And that is you get CRMs. The software industry, is consolidated too. So there's several of them to pick from, but they all have massive amounts of capability, and it's like, well, when you're managing 8,000 customers or whatever, however many customers the banks have, you don't necessarily need every last widget because the branch that handles them knows them.
Right.
It's like if you really have that's if I really have a question about, hey, I saw this deposit come through for this client, I just call the branch and they know who I'm talking about because it's the same customers they see every day. And
so you're actually not relying on it that heavily then to manage your relationships.
No, and that's part of my role is to really know the relationship extremely well. So it's really comes down to me as my role is to be that knowledge base.
And you're just keeping it all up in the dome?
I mean, not all of it. It's all in the, it's all saved in a file somewhere.
Okay. I was like, because I have a terrible memory for that stuff, so I'm like writing stuff down constantly because I'm like, it's just gonna be gone.
And in lending, when you get something approved, there's a big write-up that gets done. So a lot of it's really well documented about
so you
here's
can
what they're working on. And,
okay, I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
So you almost have a narrative to know what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah. And commercial lending, because almost no commercial loan looks like any other commercial loan. No business looks exactly the same as another business. I mean, you get to like commercial real estate, like a strip mall is a strip mall, right? But even in that strip mall, like you've got, okay, do you have an anchor? Do you not have an anchor? Like, so no two commercial loans ever look exactly the same.
Oh, that's interesting. Like the strip mall thing, like an anchor, like a big major store is going to have a much bigger impact on the performance of the space than if it's a bunch of tiny
and the
mom and
risks
pop places
associated with that. And if you start getting some vacancy, it's really hard to manage if you don't have an anchor that's pulling people in.
Interesting. That's a whole nother rabbit hole I'd love to get down, but so let's talk a little bit about work-life balance, because that's a hot button topic constantly. People are always, everyone's trying to figure it out all the time. Right. And I hear a lot of people, I think, to me, my conclusion on it is that there is no such thing as it being perfectly balanced. It's kind of like you're on like a teeter-totter and you're constantly kind of adjusting back and forth to try and like keep it in the sweet spot in your life. So what is how do you manage that in your own personal life and find that line?
It's it's hard. It's really hard. And I've been successful in my career by picking work sometimes. And so that is definitely a challenge for me, is to, thankfully I do have, good vacation time that I'm required to take every year, so it doesn't accrue like crazy. They don't want that happening. So, so some of it's almost forced upon me to like make sure I'm taking those breaks and things like that. But at the same time, like, working for a community bank locally, I'm able to drive my kid to school pretty much every day. There's always the off thing that I have to do early in the morning or whatever, but that alone is just really nice. And it's, my house, drop them off at school and go into the office. And so just having those little moments is always good. And then making sure you take the longer vacations to just spend some real time with the family and being able to turn off, being proactive in the week or so before you leave for vacation, so stuff's all handled. And,
I kind of had to.
Really
I had to learn that kind of the hard way. I was like, I can't, like, a vacation would like suddenly sneak up on me, and I'm like, I'm not ready for vacation, and like being really intentional, like in the weeks leading up to it, and it's like, okay, I gotta like deal with all these things I've put off so that they don't spill over onto me during vacation, because that causes conflict.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah.
And then you're not enjoying it because you're stressed out about something.
So that is really important.
I think that's a great tip.
Calendar out your vacations as far as you can, and then really just, like you said, be diligent in the run up to be in the best position possible to really just turn off. And not, worst case, scroll through some emails once a day or whatever, but not have really anything to.
I think it's tough. I mean, there's certain people that can just completely turn off, but I think it's really dependent. But I think, like, especially if you're a small business owner, it's pretty hard to like completely just like disappear. And you're also working with people that are small, medium-sized businesses that have that challenge. So it's probably hard for you to like, maybe sometimes you need to, be available at a minute, at last minute. But I think it is important still to be like, try and minimize those things and be present with your family and having kind of that like, mental health space, so to speak. Yeah,
because obviously, being a good relationship manager is taking pride in having those relationships, and so you can't just ignore a phone call. And a lot of my clients have my cell phone, and so if there's something that needs to get done, like, it'll get done. But the more you can prepare and
try and minimize that as much as possible. And I like the kind of the idea too of like bringing the kids to school, that finding pockets and little things in day-to-day life that you're intentional about. I was a conversation I had with last week's guest, is just, I think that's really more impactful than people realize too, is being intentional throughout the week about the little things.
Yeah, making sure that, work is work, but be present and show up for the parent-teacher conferences as much as you can and all that stuff. It for me, because, my wife is able to be at home, it's easy for me to say, oh, she'll take care of it. But that's not really the way it should be, right? I mean, I need to be present as a dad and with all the school stuff and all the other things too. Like, it's easy to say, oh, but I'm taking care of work and she'll take care of that stuff. It's like, no, you need to really, be
it's
part
easy,
of the whole process too.
Yeah, and it's easy to, if you do have a spouse that stays home too, it's sometimes easy to think oh, I'm the one working and you're just at home, but no, you're raising kids. Like that's a job. That's a job.
It's 1,000% a job. But it's easy to be like, okay, she's doing that job. Yeah. Like for me, it's like, okay, she's handling that stuff, and that's her job, because it is. It's a ton of work. Yeah. And it's like, but you can't. You don't want to totally silo it off. Like that's not 100%. Because those are your kids. That's your family. Like you need to be part of that. Yeah. As much as possible. Yeah. So. That's
great. So let's talk about I'm trying to ask most people if they're morning or night person and understand kind of what the routine is. Where do you land in that spectrum?
I'm my most productive kind of in the middle of the day, to be honest.
That is unusual. That's when everyone's trying to take a nap.
Yeah, I know. My wife gives me a hard time because I like to get up and kind of have my little time to get ready in the morning. Mm-hmm. And so that starts my day well. And, usually in the morning you kind of knock some stuff out. But, I'll find myself working through lunches just because I'm rocking and rolling. You hit the zone rolling at that point and getting stuff
so
done.
You kind of ramp up. Yeah. And then you got the little bell curve.
I really do. Yeah, exactly. And then I get home and play with the kids, and then they, once I can get them to bed, then it's like, okay, now it's just relaxing time. So it's
nice.
I'm not particularly productive after the kids go to bed, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, I am very much a morning person, and when I get home, it's real once we've done dinner and hang out and kids to bed, there's people that can go back to work at that point and get an hour of work in or something like that, or catch them on emails or whatever it is. I just it's really hard once my brain has switched to home life. Yeah. Context switching in terms of where I am is very important to me to be productive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, trying to maintain that work-life balance, I really want to do my best to turn work off when I leave work. I mean, I work in an office, so but email's always on your phone, and text, and Teams, and you got a million different ways to get communicated to. But I'm also lucky too. I think the bank that I work for really doesn't want that either.
Tries to value that.
There's people that work later and people that work earlier, but
respecting that people are working at different times and not feeling the need to just respond right away.
Yeah, and the bank doesn't want people working crazy hours way late at night. It's just not a
that's good.
Not a cultural thing that the bank desires.
Well, I think that's good, because lots of times there's companies that say they don't want that, but then in effect everyone's doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it's okay, well, what's really the expectation?
Yeah.
You're checking a box on your core values poster on the wall, but then you're not actually living it out. Yeah.
So and current day and age, everybody's struggling with hiring good quality people and having enough capacity, and everybody businesses always want more productivity from fewer headcount, right?
So, of course, yeah.
But yeah, there's you can do that to a point.
Yeah, but I think people are also starting to value that more, so they're less tolerant of being overworked. We can get into being overworked is a different, it's a different definition for everyone.
Yes.
Just being busy is a different definition for everyone, and what makes people overwhelmed is different for everyone, but just the general idea.
Yeah.
So is we talked. I wanted to make sure we talked about your morning routine, because you said you had kind of a particular thing. Is there anything special about it?
Not really. It's
just have my coffee kind of.
Not even coffee. just 30 or 40 minutes where frankly, my wife gets up and goes downstairs and starts getting the kids ready for school and stuff like that. And so I close the door and really just have 30, 40 minutes to myself to just take a shower and get dressed, and so that little bit of me zone time just gets
it makes a difference.
Going.
You look great every day. That's nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the bonus stuff. I do want to we talked a little. I do want to end this section in, if you had like one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self, what would that be?
I think like I said, I have picked work sometimes, and it can seem like it's really helpful in the moment, but you kind of forget about those moments, and then you think about the things that you didn't do.
I can relate to that.
And so, work will always be there. You know what I mean? There will always be more stuff to do at work. And so
I relate too much to that. I definitely remember the moments that I picked. I remember the moments that I picked work over family time, but I don't remember what work I picked. I remember the moment that I missed because of it.
Yeah.
And it felt so important in the moment.
Yeah. And that's you go back and you think about, I remember something was on fire and I canceled this vacation or whatever, and it's like you can't even remember what that thing that was on fire anymore because it doesn't matter, but you missed the vacation, and that that's what sticks with you.
No one's and I think that's what I keep coming back to in all the conversations too with my wife, and finding that balance, because you have to work to build something, but at the same time, if you're on your deathbed and you're scrolling through photos and albums and stuff, there's no pictures of that thing that was of work, or the thing that was on fire at work, right?
Yeah.
It's all the top things you did with your family or whoever's important to you. It's the time with other people. So I think that's that's good perspective to have.
Making sure that you are working to live, not living to work. And so and there's definitely some generational stuff that goes along with that.
I will say there's people in my life that phrase triggers them. Because and I think it's difficult because especially it does somewhat depend on the industry. As someone who comes from a family farming background, it is animal agriculture is a lifestyle thing. You can't animals have to be taken care of 7 days a week.
You cannot turn it off.
Right. So it is a little bit different, and that there are some industries and things like that where it is a lifestyle choice. But I think you still have to find a way to work around that, right? Because once again, your animals aren't going to be around your deathbed mourning your loss when you're gone. Right. So it's a difficult balance to find, and it's not easy. So we're oversimplifying it here, and it feels like a difficult decision in the moment. A difficult decision in the moment. So
because that work pressure, it's always present, right? There's always pressure to execute. There's always pressure to get stuff done, and so it can be hard to be I know I feel the pressure, but I don't need to handle this right this second.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, it's good to hear about the culture thing. I think it's also a cultural thing in the company, because I would say that lots of times when I was in having to make those decisions, there were opportunities for someone could have, if there was a better culture, someone could have stepped in and said, you know what, I got your back, go do your thing, I'll take care of it. Right? And having open and honest communication with each other about those moments and being willing to cover for each other. Because I almost guarantee in those banking situations, there was probably someone else in the bank that could have stepped in and helped you out.
And when I go on vacation and things like that, you do all these things to prepare and not leave much to do. But, when I leave, I have two people, I have my boss and another lender on my email. I've given both of those people a list of here's what I have kind of active right now. Here's where it's at. If something pops, it's probably going to be one of these things, and here's what to do. And I know it'll get handled if if it really does pop or whatever.
And I will say that sometimes in the past it was self-inflicted. I could have prepared better. So it's not completely on everyone else. That's just being young and dumb, and not planning well enough. So but let's get into the bonus questions.
Sure.
So what are some of the books that you've either gifted or recommended the most to people?
That's a tough one. I received Obama's book a while back. That's a really good one.
Which one? Because he's had a few of them, right?
It was his biography one.
Okay.
Which I think it's just called Obama, but that was a really great book. I would recommend that to anybody. Really, really interesting. There's some like random like banking ones that I was given and I've passed on to other people about like problem loans and like weird things like that.
Interesting.
That's kind of more industry specific, but there's some pretty funny ones that, you know, a little bit of tongue in cheek, but talking about, you know, managing a problem loan and things like that. But
okay, I appreciate that. So the and for those interested, there is in the show notes of the podcast, there's a list of all the books that we talked about on it. So and you can send me some of the links to those, and we'll throw them in there if people want to see them, because it's always fun. And then what's one thing you would put on a billboard? And I'm not talking about like an advertisement, but like one thing you'd want everyone to see on the side of like a busy freeway.
I don't know. I mean, we talked about it a lot. I think just, you know, slow down and make sure you're engaged in your life. I mean, that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
When you get pulled in a lot of different directions.
Don't be so busy that life passes you by.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's millions of songs written about it. I mean, it's, you know, it really is a universal kind of platitude, but it's hard to do in the moment. And you've got to figure out.
I think it requires. I think it's because it requires intentionality. You like have to constantly come back around and refocus on it and prioritize, like being mindful. And I think that's what's hard, because it's easy just to get. I mean, everyone talks about it, you know. But I think the reason you have to keep talking about it is because it's easy, like, to get lost in just the rat race and just like just life.
Once you're on that hamster wheel, it's
hard
to get off unless you like really try and slow it down to a point where you can step off.
Yeah, making those decisions. Okay, so well, Ramsay, it's been wonderful having you on.
Of course.
It's a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been an episode of On the Flywheel. Episodes are released every Sunday, and you can follow us wherever podcasts are found. Thank you.